You know that feeling when you sit down at a breakfast spot you've trusted for years and something seems off? The pancakes look smaller, the bacon feels thinner, the coffee somehow costs more but tastes worse. You stare at the bill wondering if you're imagining things. You're not. Over the past several years, breakfast chains across America have quietly changed. Some cut portions. Some raised prices. Some swapped fresh ingredients for cheaper alternatives. Others loaded themselves with debt, closed locations, and hoped you wouldn't notice until it was too late. But not every chain took that path. While some breakfast giants were busy cutting corners, a handful doubled down on fresh food, honest recipes, and the things that made people loyal in the first place. Today we're breaking down the 7 worst and 7 best breakfast chains in America in 2026. We dug into health inspections, financial filings, ownership records, and thousands of recent reviews. The pattern is impossible to miss. When investors start treating restaurants like spreadsheets instead of kitchens, the food suffers first. Then the customers. Then the business. Let's start with the ones quietly disappointing you right now. Number 7, Perkins. There was a time when Perkins felt dependable. Not exciting, not trendy. Dependable, a giant breakfast plate, bottomless coffee, and servers who'd probably worked there longer than some customers had been alive. That version is getting harder to find. Reviewers describe pancakes arriving flatter, syrup thinner, eggs sitting under heat lamps until they turn rubbery. One Ohio customer called a recent visit a ghost of what Perkins used to be, saying the bakery case looked half empty and what was there tasted days old. Perkins has changed hands multiple times, and like everyone else on this list, the cost-cutting shows up on the plate. Portions have shrunk while prices climbed nearly 35% in the last 5 years in many markets. Locations have thinned out quietly. The bakery counter that used to draw families in now feels like an afterthought. Perkins still has the name and the nostalgia. The kitchen has just been making different choices. Number 6, Village Inn. Come hungry, leave happy was the promise. In 2026, some franchisees are barely hanging on. Multiple Village Inn operators filed for Chapter 11 this year as revenue kept sliding, with one Florida group watching sales drop year after year under the same pressure hitting the whole industry, fewer customers walking in, and rising costs they can't pass along without losing the customers they have left. Reviews are inconsistent. Some locations still turn out a solid Eggs Benedict. Others serve pancakes that taste like the mix sat too long in gravy with no real sausage flavor in it. The pie case, once the chain's signature, now draws complaints about stale selections and shrinking slices. When a brand built on its bakery starts disappointing there first, that's the tell. The whole identity of Village Inn was built around the idea that you could walk in hungry and leave happy without thinking twice about the bill. That promise only holds up if the kitchen has the resources to deliver it consistently, and right now, plenty of locations don't. Village Inn isn't gone. But if the pie doesn't taste homemade anymore, the rest of the meal probably won't either. Number 5, Bob Evans. Bob Evans started on an actual farm. The man himself raised hogs and made sausage from scratch, building a brand on honest, farm-style comfort food. He passed in 2007. What came after is a familiar story. Private equity moved in, first Golden Gate Capital, then others. They loaded the company with debt and went hunting for efficiencies. The results, gravy that's thinner and darker, biscuits that arrive hard or pre-made, hash browns with an odd aftertaste. Diners now report bills creeping toward $40 to $45 for what used to feel like a genuine value meal. Hundreds of locations have closed since the chain's peak, the name's still on the door. The farm-to-table origin story is still on the wall, framed and proud, like nothing changed. But when the sausage, the very thing the brand was founded on, tastes more like a cost-saving decision than pork, you're eating the private equity version of Bob Evans, not the original, and no amount of farmhouse decor on the walls is going to fix that. Number 4, Cracker Barrel. You remember the biscuit. Tall, golden, flaky layers pulling apart with steam still rising off them. That biscuit was the reason people got off the highway. In 2026, it's still on the plate, but it's not the same biscuit. Longtime customers and reviewers say the layers don't separate the way they used to. The crust has lost its crackle, because too many are baked in big batches earlier and reheated later. The hash brown casserole dries out. The gravy tastes like paste to a lot of diners now. When sales slipped, leadership's big move was changing the logo and pulling the old Uncle Herschel mascot, which triggered instant backlash. The mascot came back. The food quality didn't bounce back at the same pace. One activist investor pointed to over $1 billion and destroyed shareholder value. And it didn't come from outside forces. It came from decisions made inside the company. Cracker Barrel at least started as something real. The next one started sliding even faster. Worst number 3, IHOP. Close your eyes and think about pancakes. For millions of Americans, one name comes to mind immediately. That kind of brand recognition took decades to build. The problem now is maintaining it. This year, health inspectors keep finding the same troubling patterns at multiple locations. Food held past safe limits, ham sitting on the line for days longer than regulations allow, batter and eggs at improper temperatures, signs of pest activity in some kitchens. One South Carolina location made headlines for a C-grade inspection that turned up spoiled produce and unclean silverware. A local physician warned that for anyone over 65, conditions like that aren't just disappointing, they're a real health risk. Financially, IHOP's parent company has been swinging between thin profits and losses, closing dozens of locations while opening far fewer new ones. The syrup bottles are still lined up on the table, little soldiers waiting for you to pick a favorite. What's underneath them has been quietly downgraded. If you see a low health grade posted at the door, especially with older family members along, the smart move is simple: leave. Worst number 2, Denny's. Denny's built its reputation on being open when nothing else was. 3 in the morning, holidays, snowstorms, didn't matter. That reliability built generations of loyal customers. But reliability only works if people feel like they're getting value, and that's exactly where this falls apart. The chain was acquired by Triartisan Capital Advisors, a firm with previous restaurant bankruptcies on its arsenal, including TGE Fridays. They loaded over $600 million in debt-driven financing onto Denny's books, and that pressure now touches every decision made in the kitchen. The results were predictable. 88 locations closed in 2024, with more following in 2025 and 2026. Customer satisfaction scores sank to the bottom of the full-service category. Prices climbed while portions shrank. Regulars describe bills approaching steakhouse territory without anything close to steakhouse quality behind them. This isn't a sudden collapse. It's death by 1,000 small compromises, the kind that don't make headlines on their own but add up fast when you stack a year of them together. When your Grand Slam costs more but delivers less, that's not inflation. That's the private equity tax. And the question isn't whether more locations close. It's how many are left standing when it's done. Worst number 1, Frisch's Big Boy. This is the most heartbreaking one on the list. A 76-year-old Midwest institution, a family drive-in passed down through generations until 2015 when Ennard Capital, a private equity firm out of Atlanta, became the first outside owner in its history. What happened next is the exact playbook you've seen repeating through this whole list. They sold off the real estate and leased it back, turning a stable, debt-free business into a rent-burdened one overnight. When sales slowed, they stopped paying suppliers on time. A former employee, Ashley Ferguson, went public explaining that normal food shipments simply stopped arriving because the bills weren't getting paid. The food didn't get worse because the cooks stopped caring. It got worse because the supply chain collapsed underneath them. By late 2024 and through 2025 and 2026, eviction notices started flying. Locations closed with little warning, some with servers who'd worked there 20 or 30 years pouring a final cup of coffee before walking out to confused regulars. Unpaid rent in some cases topped $4.5 million. The parking lots are still there. The soul is gone. It took 76 years to build this place and less than a decade to dismantle it. Every single chain on this worst of list shares the same plot. Outside financial players move in, load up debt, cut corners on food and staff, extract whatever value they can, and leave the brand a hollowed-out version of what it used to be. The name on the sign stays. The quality leaves with the old ownership. But not every breakfast chain went down this road. Some refused. Here are the 7 best breakfast chains in America in 2026, the ones still worth driving out of your way for. Number 7, Eggs Up Grill. Most people haven't heard of Eggs Up Grill yet, and that might be part of why it's working. This fast-growing southern chain does one thing extremely well: breakfast and lunch. Then it closes at 2 p.m. No dinner, no late-night compromises, just focused execution during the hours that actually matter to its kitchen. That single decision has fueled real growth. Sales are up more than 30% in recent years, with record numbers of new locations opening and rankings among the top breakfast franchises in the country multiple years running. The waffles taste fresher because the kitchen isn't stretched across 3 different day parts. Prices stay reasonable, around $12 to $14 for a meal that actually fills you up. Eggs Up Grill proves doing less, but doing it with real focus beats trying to be everything to everyone. It's a model other chains keep claiming to admire right before they ignore it and add a dinner menu anyway. Number 6, another broken egg cafe. This chain has quietly built a loyal following across the Southeast by refusing to cut corners on what actually matters. The Benedicts are the standout, perfectly poached eggs, house-made hollandaise, creative twists that never tip into gimmicky. In 2026, it keeps expanding while holding strong same-store performance in a brutal market for sit-down breakfast. What separates it is consistency and ingredient focus. Reviewers keep pointing to the freshness of the crab cakes, the quality of the sausage, and the fact that portions still feel generous. The restaurants have a bright, welcoming feel without coming across as corporate, and management has clearly invested in training and keeping staff who actually care about the morning shift, something a lot of chains gave up on years ago. While others were chasing cost savings, this one chased repeat customers. The result is a chain that still feels like a local favorite even as it grows. Number 5, First Watch. First Watch runs on a genuinely radical idea in 2026. There's no freezer, no frozen batter, no pre-portioned shortcuts. Every ingredient has to be fresh because there's nowhere to hide if it isn't. The chain closes at 2:30 every afternoon. No dinner, no bar, just breakfast and lunch done properly. Then the kitchen shuts down. That discipline is paying off in a big way. In 2025 and 2026, they opened a record 64 new locations, with same-store sales growing nearly 20%. A new location in Fredericksburg, Virginia did over $90,000 in its first week. Employee turnover dropped while job applications surged, and the company publicly committed to absorbing rising ingredient costs itself rather than passing them on to loyal customers, the exact opposite of nearly every chain on the worst list. The lemon ricotta pancakes and the SoCal hash with fresh avocado only work in a kitchen that's actually cooking from scratch. First Watch turned its biggest apparent weakness, limited hours, into its greatest strength, total focus. Number 4, Waffle House. The Waffle House Index is real. FEMA, the federal government's own disaster response agency, uses it to gauge how bad a natural disaster actually is. Green means Waffle House is open with a full menu and the community's probably okay. Yellow means a limited menu. Red means it's closed. And that's catastrophic. A federal agency trusts a breakfast chain as a benchmark for whether civilization is still functioning where you live. That tells you everything you need to know. Founded in 1955 in Avondale Estates, Georgia, the company has never sold out to outside investors. Every manager started as a server or a cook and worked their way up through the company. The kitchens are open, so there's nowhere to hide what's happening to your food. While other chains spent the last few years closing locations and quietly shrinking quality, Waffle House grew sales and held its 2,000-plus locations under the same ownership the whole time. They did stumble once with a temporary egg surcharge during a price spike, but they listened, reversed it fast, and moved on without the usual corporate excuses. That kind of accountability is rare. The hash browns scattered, smothered, and covered still hit the plate exactly the way they have for decades. Number 3, the original pancake house. The apple pancake takes 20 minutes. You will wait, and you should. Fresh Granny Smith apples sauteed in real butter, folded into a German-style batter. Baked slowly in cast iron, flipped at exactly the right moment so the cinnamon sugar glaze is still bubbling when it lands on your table. This isn't fast food wearing a breakfast costume. It's a genuine commitment. Founded in 1953 in Portland, Oregon by Les and Irma Hyatt, the chain is still family-owned 3 generations later. The batter is made fresh every single morning, in every location. No private equity, no bankruptcy, no quiet strategic realignment that shrinks the portions when nobody's looking. While the worst chains on this list got sold, leveraged, and hollowed out, the original Pancake House was protected by people who understood they weren't managing a spreadsheet. They were guarding a recipe. The wait is the point. Rush it and you ruin it, and in 70-plus years, they never have. Number 2, Black Bear Diner. When private equity bought into Black Bear Diner back in 2016, everyone braced for the usual story. Instead, something rare happened. The chain doubled down on exactly what made it work in the first place. Huge portions, honest scratch cooking, and that classic roadside diner feel with a little bear-themed charm built in. Founded in Mount Shasta, California in 1995, Black Bear kept expanding thoughtfully through 2025 and 2026, while plenty of competitors were shrinking. Reviewers routinely drive 30 to 60 minutes for the chicken fried steak, the bear claw pastries, and omelets that actually fill the plate. Leadership came up through the company instead of arriving from some distant boardroom, and that's exactly why the brand's soul stayed intact. No freezer-dependent shortcuts, no crushing debt load dumped onto the restaurants. Just a big, satisfying breakfast, done right, consistently. Number 1, Biscuitville. Most Americans have never been to Biscuitville, and that's genuinely a shame, because it might be the single clearest example of a chain that still understands its own mission. The entire reputation rests on one promise: fresh biscuits, made constantly through the morning, every 15 minutes, not reheated, not mass-produced hours earlier and held under a lamp. Think about what that actually requires. Every morning, every location, every single day, without exception. Biscuitville could cut that corner exactly like the chains on the worst half of this list did. Instead, it doubled down on the one thing customers actually came for. The biscuits taste fresh because they are fresh. The breakfast sandwiches feel satisfying because the ingredients underneath them still matter. And the whole experience feels authentic because authenticity is still baked into the business model. Literally, here's the pattern across all 14 of these chains. The worst 7 were largely handed to financial players whose first instinct was extraction, load on debt, sell off the real estate, cut the ingredients, shrink the portions, and hope nobody noticed in time. The best 7 stayed closer to why they existed in the first place. Food first. Ownership that actually understands kitchens. Choices that sometimes mean growing slower or closing earlier in the day in exchange for serving something real. Most customers at the worst chains noticed the higher prices and the smaller plates, but couldn't quite explain why it didn't taste right anymore. It wasn't nostalgia playing tricks on them. It was a business model that prioritizes the exit over the eggs. So next time you walk into a breakfast chain, look a little closer. Who actually owns it? Have they loaded it with debt? Is that biscuit steaming because it was made 20 minutes ago? Or is there a freezer in the back doing the real work? Those questions matter more now than they ever have. Breakfast is supposed to be one of the simplest pleasures there is. A few chains are still protecting that. The rest are hoping you don't notice that they stopped. Now you know the difference, and you'll never walk into a breakfast chain the same way again.